Good day, and thank you for checking out the Sportsline Podcast here on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neil. As we like to say in these parts, if you can make it in Hamilton, Halton, and Niagara, you can make it anywhere. And it's those teams, athletes, executives, and broadcasters who we love to spotlight on the Sportsline Podcast. Well, from the small community of North Adams, Massachusetts, John Salavantis took his playing experience as an offensive lineman and built a football resume as a coach on both sides of the border that covers leagues like the NCAA, NJCAA, the World League of American Football, and the Canadian Football League. As a Grey Cup winning coach with the Tiger Cats, legends maintain Coach Sal built the best offensive line unit and never swore at us, even when we deserved it. For years as an analyst on radio, and to this day, the Hamilton community know him as the coach on the Ticats audio network. And straight up, this individual is the most knowledgeable football mind that I have ever met. And folks, I'm really happy to have John Salavantis with us here on the Sportsline Podcast. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Bubba, you're more than welcome. And you know, you're building me up to something that I may not be. But I do appreciate the fact that you asked me to come and talk with you about the Ticats.
Well, because you know football, you know the CFL as well as anyone. Like I said, I certainly mean what I said. But I mean, I've learned so much from you. And we had Mike Morreale here a couple of weeks ago, and he, I mean, as a player for a dozen years, said he still, as a broadcaster, learned more about the game than he might have even known as a player.
Yeah, well, I think it was Mickey Mantle when he went into the broadcast booth after he retired, and he said, and I paraphrase it somehow, he said, I didn't know how simple the game was until I came here and tried to describe it to other people.
Well, Coach, how are you? I mean, it's the off season right now. I mean, we've gone through that long season. Ticats lose in the Eastern semifinal in 2023. And during the off season, do you just shut it down from football?
Basically, I get away from it, not completely, but enough that, I keep an eye on what's going on and try to stay abreast of the new rules and changes, etc. But mostly, I just let it play out because you really don't know. Every year, every team is a different team. Every coaching staff's a different coaching staff. So you start from ground zero every year. And that's what the Ticats are doing now with Scott Milanovich as their head coach.
Are you surprised at the changes that happened? I mean, we're talking about Coach O, no longer Coach O, now being the president, and Scott coming in. And I think we knew that his role was going to increase, especially when he became more so the offensive coordinator. Did you expect that move there? And, of course, the moving in of a new general manager, a solo general manager as well?
You know, this goes back to Bob Young and Scott Mitchell. I mean, they've teamed up and they've put together what I would regard as a corporation. And when you look at it from top to bottom, you have the president or, let's say, the caretaker, number one. Then you have the president, which is Scott Mitchell, CEO. And then you start moving down and widening out. And so I'm not surprised that they're able to do it with that way of doing business. I am surprised that O went out as early as he did. I thought he's a good coach, and he had time as a young man to continue coaching. But I think when they brought Milanovich in, you go back to when they brought June Jones in.
Right.
June Jones behind Ken Austin. They have their next head coach here in the organization. So they don't have to go to the outside, bring in an outside person. That Scott knows the system now, understands their corporate structure, and will fit right into what's going on.
And he comes into a team, though, and we cannot deny this. I mean, the Tiger Cats, that long break between Grey Cups and where we are at present day, reaching 25 years. Is Scott ready for that kind of pressure? I mean, the Hamilton football fan, they demand. I mean, they're getting to the point where they're demanding wins. They demand to be in the postseason. And with that comes some coaching pressures.
Yeah, Scott's up to that task. There's no question about that. His time in Montreal, his time in Toronto, being with Jacksonville in the NFL, he understands the pressure of the game, and he understands the pressure of the fans. When you go back to where I came in 1985, we were at probably the lowest ebb of football in a long period of time for the CFL. Fan base was around 16,000 people. And I think that was pumped up. When we went to Ivor Wynn, you could count the fans in the stands. But they were passionate fans, and they've always remained passionate fans. And to answer your question, they will demand that you win. Now, every practice, every draft choice, every game is in preparation for one game. And that one game is the Grey Cup game. So you schedule everything and you work everything in a fashion that it brings you right to that game. And so fans, need to be cognizant of the fact you don't win every game in the CFL. Mm-hmm. What you have to do is win enough games to put you in that last game of the year.
Let's talk Ticats a little bit later. I need to know a little bit, and I think people want to know a little bit about Coach John Salavantis. Before the coach, a player at Ottawa University in Kansas? I didn't know any. I'll be honest with you. When I first got to know you, I saw Ottawa. I thought you just became a coach at Ottawa U. It was not the case.
No, Ottawa University in Kansas is a small Baptist school, and we played in a 11-team league. And very proud to say that in the 5 years I was there, because I was redshirted the first year, in the 5 years that I was there, we lost 4 ball games. So it was a really great experience for me, because the coaches that I had, and Coach Peters, Dick Peters, was the head coach at that time, and had been in the NCAA, et cetera, after coming out of Kansas State as a great player. And he was a teaching coach, and he taught me so many things, and he inspired me to do things on the field that I didn't think I was capable of doing. Mm-hmm. And as a captain of the team, et cetera, we were so proud that we could compete at that level. But at the same time, I was learning, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was learning what it took to be a coach. And I always appreciated the fact that Coach Peters was always there for me.
Was that your inspiration to continue playing, at least coaching, at least staying in football and becoming a coach?
Absolutely. We had a course in football. And we actually, in the off season, we padded up and went outside, but it wasn't to practice. It was there to learn how to coach certain elements of the ball game. And then we went through a process where we had to go out and scout another team and bring that scouting report back and present that scouting report to our fellow classmates. And so through all of that, I was beginning to understand that might be a calling that I could get into and enjoy. And Bubba, as long as I coached, I never worked a day. It was just fun for me. And the guys that I had through the early years that I was here in the CFL, I started with Saskatchewan as a guest coach in '83. And then Monty Charles was here. It was a friend of mine and helped me get to know Al Bruno. And Al Bruno hired me, and we went through that period of time where I was learning the CFL game. It was all new. It was all different to me. And I had a lot of help along the way. And a lot of it came from our players.
Well, and because you had built up a sweet resume, as we showed earlier there, about your days as a coach in the NCAA level. We'll call it the U.S. college system, before you came to Canada, and learning the 4-down game, and again, learning as you were as a head coach at some point as well. But before you went to the CFL, there was a stop with the team that I think a lot of people have forgotten, and that is the Montreal Machine. What was that experience like? The Montreal Machine.
La Machine. Yes. That was a year, 89, we went to the Grey Cup and we lost that Grey Cup game to Saskatchewan. The very next year, Al Bruno got fired, and at the end of that season, I was let go as a coach, fired, if you will. And the Machine presented itself as an opportunity to go with the NFL team, and we were in Orlando, Florida, for the month of February. We opened our season in Alabama. We had never been in the O as a team. Had never been in Montreal.
Wow!
Yet the team was formed in Orlando, Florida. Played its first ball game in Alabama, then came to the Big O to open our season. And I think we opened with 56,000 people.
Wow!
In the stadium at that time.
And I was just about to say, I mean, that league, I have faint memories of it. I do remember it, and it didn't really last very long. But wasn't it seen as sort of a building block, a minor league system, if I could call it that, to get to that next level in the National Football League?
Absolutely. And the National Football League funded it.
Oh, okay.
The National Football League was the primary. There was a practice team that was set up in Dallas, Texas, that practiced. And so if you had an injury on your ball club and you needed a tight end, you called Dallas, and Dallas forwarded a person to your team. We played around. We played in London. We played in Frankfurt, Germany. We played in Spain. We played in Florida. We played in Texas. The Texas group was really an interesting group because we flew from Montreal, and they put us on two separate airplanes as a team.
What?
One went to Philadelphia first, and the other one went to Boston, and then they met again in Dallas. And from Dallas, we moved on down to the Aladome in San Antonio. So things were different and fun. It was really an enjoyable time. And of course, we didn't fare well as a football team, and I was out of that the very next year.
Was Faragelli there?
Yeah, Joe Faragelli, Don Southern, and myself from the CFL. Joe was the offensive coordinator. I was the line coach. Don Southern was the D coordinator and D-line coach.
Amazing, and where the travels would go, and you see that with assistant coaches to this day. Where you trace that traveling of where you end up. It's amazing to me. So your journey all of a sudden brings you to the Tiger Cats. How did that begin?
It's a long story that I can cut down and make very short. I was the OC at Missouri Southern State College in Joplin, Missouri. There was a fellow that kept sitting in the stands every day, and our head coach got nervous that he was spying on our team during practices. So he asked me to go talk to him, and I went and talked to him. Turned out the guy was Monty Charles. Monty Charles had been in the CFL. He'd been a successful head coach in Wisconsin and was actually in that area because he had contracted leukemia, and basically he couldn't work. And Monty and I became friends, and I asked him if he would like to come down and help me on the offensive side. And he did. And we worked together for a year, 2 years actually, in Joplin. And then Monty got a chance to go back to Saskatchewan as a coach because he healed up from the leukemia. He went back to Saskatchewan. From Saskatchewan, he went to Hamilton and was here as personnel. And he called me on the phone one day, and I was, at that time, I was in Garden City, Kansas as a coach. And he called me and he said, stick by your phone, Al Bruno's going to call you and offer you a job. And sure enough, Al got on the phone and he said, I'd like you to come up here and visit. I flew up here to Canada and spent a week in the hotel with Al, talking every day about football. Went back to my duties in Garden City, and Al called me in April, and as of April 15th this year, being offered that job, 39 years ago.
Wow.
And I said, absolutely, I'd come up there and work, and that's how it all came about.
And Hamilton trapped you.
Yeah.
You got trapped in Hamilton from there. No, so you had some special years with that team. I know when we think Grey Cup here, because it's been so long, we just talked about the 25-year drought, I think automatic thoughts go to the 1999 club, which were magical, the Fluties, the McManus, we can go on, Joe Montfort. But there was a 1986 team that was real special, weren't they?
Oh, they were. They were special. You know, I came in 85, and in 85, we started out 1-6 that season. And I thought to myself, this might not be a long stay. But we turned it around. We went 7-2 in the second part of that season, got ourselves into the Grey Cup, went to Montreal and played BC and lost that ball game. But we vowed after that game that we'd be back. And our team put itself together the next year in 86. We started out a little slow, but we picked up the pace on that season. And we had a quarterback named Kenny Hobart. Kenny Hobart was a quarterback out of Idaho that was a linebacker, fullback, quarterback who could run with the football. And so we developed our offense around Kenny. He ended up with 982 yards rushing as a quarterback.
Wow.
While he was second in the league in touchdown passes in 85. In 86, we start out, as I said, a little slow. Kenny gets hurt, and we turn to Mike Kerrigan. Now we have to change our entire offense because Kerrigan's a drop-back quarterback where Kenny was a rollout, sprint-out type quarterback. We changed our offense in about the fifth ball game, and went to a drop-back game. And Mike Kerrigan carried us through that year right to the end.
And that had to be a real adjustment because you're the offensive line coach. And the offensive line, you just talked about a guy that's a sprinter, a runner, a guy that likes to roll out to this drop-back style, kind of NFL-style quarterback. I think he did play with the Patriots a little bit.
He did.
How tough was that for the offensive line? You must have had some good guys there.
We did, and credit Joe Zuger and Al Bruno for that because they brought in guys. We brought in Miles Gurrell in 85, 8-year veteran at that time. They had let him go in Montreal. We brought him in here. Unfortunately, in the first ball game he was in, we had him going downfield on a kickoff. He broke his arm.
Ouch.
So he was out for that game. We traded for Johnny Malinowski, who was I think at that time was a 9-year veteran of the league from Toronto as a tackle. We inserted in our offensive line, we had or inherited Marv Alamang, who was playing tackle, and we inherited Jason Riley, who was playing tackle. I moved both of those guys from tackle, put Marv Alamang at the center and put Jason at the guard. We had Mike Dirks, who had come to us from Edmonton, was a draft choice. We had Dale Sanderson come in. We had Ralph Scholes here. So we molded that group. And as you say, in the sprint-out game, we were turn-back protection, and it was completely different from what it had to be with Mike Kerrigan. But those veterans, Alamang and Riley, and again, Johnny Malinowski on the outside, were able to adjust and work the rookie guys into that. And we ended up that year basically with the least number of sacks in the league and the most number of dropbacks in the league.
That. So you win.
Yeah.
How awesome was winning?
Oh, it's everything. Everybody talks about the fun part of the game. The fun part is winning. And you have to take your lumps along the way, but you also have to keep a very positive attitude of what's happening, how it's going to unfold. And when we had to go in 86 and play Toronto in that 2-game total point series and went into Toronto basically way down in points and to come away with that win, we knew we were going to win the Grey Cup.
Were you inspired by the words of Leo Cahill?
Well, Leo Cahill is a different story, but Bob Obilovich was the was the guy that at that time, and of course we've known Bob for so many years after that. Bob was devastated that he lost that ball game, but it turned around on our defensive side. You know, and a great story that came out of that game. We always dressed only 6 offensive linemen. Pat Brady, our long snapper, was our 6th offensive lineman, and in the pregame warm-up, John Malinowski got hurt. Don't ask me how. He got hurt. He had a tear in his right knee. So he's out of the ball game. And we asked to put another player in to replace him. And Bob O'Neil said no. Under the league rules, within the first hour of the ball game, you couldn't make any more changes. And so we went into the ball game with 6 offensive linemen, ended up starting the ball game with 5 offensive linemen, and had to survive that game. And survive we did, and win we did.
So that's an outstanding story, Coach. You know, and your journey would continue, and then there's a stop with Ottawa, the Rough Riders, and then maybe there's a little football purgatory there. But then a call comes from the Little General.
Yeah. There was a period of time when Ronnie Lancaster had to take over. I think that's what you're referring to in 2006.
Yep.
Had to take over for a fired coaching staff. And Ronnie asked me if I would come back and help him through the 2006 season. And oddly enough, Jason Moss was our quarterback that time. This year's Grey Cup champion from Montreal was our quarterback. He's the head coach in Montreal. But we spent the latter part of that season together. Ronnie and I did, and of course that was always a thrill. Ronnie always spent time with us during the 80s in our training camp at Brock University. He was there almost every day because he wanted to be around football, and so were his 2 young boys at that time. So.
Yeah, there was a good offensive mind. It was Ronnie Jr.
Ronnie Jr.
Ronnie Jr. was a good offensive coordinator, I think, for the Ticats for a time.
Yeah, and Bobby went down to the States and coached. Bobby, the younger son, went down to the States and coached down there for a long period of time.
As so many football players do, as so many coaches do, as we see right now, there's the move to the broadcast booth. And I'll tell you, did you feel nervous? Was this something that you said, okay, you know what? I know a lot about this game. I've had experiences. I've won Grey Cup. Like, to translate all that information, sometimes it's very difficult for coaches and players to go to the booth, whether it be radio or television. And radio is probably a little more difficult because you kind of have to describe more. Was that a challenge for you?
It's very interesting because when I went with CHML to call the games, the first game I called, Bob Bertina was the play-by-play guy. And I came into the booth, and I must have had about 10 sheets of paper in front of me. And Bob looked at me and kind of said, "You don't need that stuff," and gathered it up and kind of shuffled it off to the side and said, "Just do whatever you feel you see in the ballgame." And I credit Bob so much for the fact that I was able to relax and go through that process with him. They did stumble me into a situation one time where at the halftime of it, they had Vince Mazza and Ralph Sagio as the guests. And Bertina and Hooper disappeared and left me there with those 2 guys to run a halftime show. Now, I'm going to tell you, you talk about being nervous and being scared. I didn't understand what was going on. And Vince Mazza took over the mic, and of course, it all went off well, and the guys had a big chuckle off it.
Well, people don't recognize. They call it the A chair, the B chair in some cases. Someone who's guiding the broadcast, and then there's someone who's like the analyst. Like very much when I'm with the Ticats Audio Network, I'm sort of the host, if you want to call it that. And then Andy Fantus is the guy who's the expert, the knowledgeable. I throw questions to him. But yeah, the role reversal can be sometimes very, very difficult.
Yeah, it is, and it was. But it was a lesson well learned, and then we had a lot of fun with it. And those 2 guys, of course, were great CFL legends.
I'm going to ask our director, Mike Horson, to bring up a sheet here about some of the people that you've worked with in the broadcast booth. And I mean, look at these names: Bettina McAuliffe, Ricky Zamperin, Andy Mack for a year, of course, Marshall Ferguson. And I've been fortunate and lucky enough to know all of these people here. And they all call the game a little bit differently. For you as an analyst, how was it? I mean, each one of these guys has their own individual skills and greatness. But how did you fit into all those different? They're all so different.
They are different, and again, I go back to the fact that with Bob Bettina, I had learned what I was supposed to do, and so when we went with Tim McAuliffe, who was a great host of TV shows, etc., it was a little bit different. And one of the things that I had to learn with Tim was Tim would start a sentence and pause. And when he paused, I thought that was my turn to come in. Mm-hmm. And so I would step on him a few times during the broadcast. And we finally worked that out to where I understood what he was doing. When we moved on with Rick Zamperin, Rick and I worked, 9 years, I believe it was, together in the booth. And Rick was just absolutely perfect for me because he had the right attitude towards the play-by-play guy, set it up for the analysts, et cetera. And then from there, of course, we went to Marshall Ferguson, who's just a ball of fire, and Marshall wanted to talk. And you know, I found with Marshall that I had to almost kind of slow him down a little bit and let things develop.
He's loaded with information.
Oh, yeah. And rightfully so. He's an intelligent and doing a great job right now with TSN. So all of them were different, but at the same time, we seem to be able to work it all out. And in the end result, we thought we did a pretty good job with all of them.
Well, I can state from my standpoint here in the couple of years that I've been fortunate enough to be on the pre and post game show with the Ticats Audio Network. Like I've said it to you, and I'll say it to you your face. I've said it to you when we were on radio. Times when we were at Tim Hortons Field and you are present with us. Like our segments I think they're legendary. I can present to you different situations when times are good with the Tiger Cats and times are bad, and you're even keeled and you just deliver the goods, whether it be a stressful situation for the team or not.
I think that's important for people that do the job that I was doing and continue to do. You can't get too high and you can't get too low. You've got to be fair with the players. You've got to be fair with the coaches, but you also have to tell the truth. You can't allow yourself to get into a situation where you skim over things. You've got to tell it like it is, because that's what the fans want. That's what the fans come there to listen to or watch, and they want to hear it from somebody.
Okay, let's talk about these Ticats now. Again, I keep saying it, but I can't help it. It amazes me. You've been around this league for so long. It's a 9-team league. The 25 years since the Tiger Cats have won a Grey Cup. Like, if you do the physics and the mathematics, it doesn't make sense. Like, the team should have won at least one in a 9 or 10 team league at some point, but it just hasn't happened. I know each year, and you're right, and I know Coach always used to say it, every year, every team is different. Why haven't they won?
They got there several times, but they weren't able to capitalize on it and come away with a win. I think it shows you how difficult it is. You know, when we went in '85, in '86, I thought, well, this is good. We do this all the time. Well, '87, '88, we showed that we couldn't do the job. And then come back in '89 and got the job done. And then the team went through the '90s where things were really bad for a long period of time. And then when Ronnie Lancaster came in and brought in the quarterback and the receiver from Edmonton that was necessary to make things work, they get into the Grey Cup in '98, but they have to come back in '99 to win it. So it is very difficult to get there.
I think about the years with Kent. Kent two sniffs at it as well too. Coach O, 2 sniffs at it as well too. And that, what's killing me? It'll kill me. That 15-3 team, I like they were. I mean, you saw they were amazing. Like every screw turned. An injury drop. Someone stepped up. Down goes Masolo. Here comes Evans. Like everything worked. But it just goes to show you, as that one movie says, on any given day in this sport, anything can happen.
Absolutely. And you have to take that attitude into your play. And you can't win them all, but you've got to win the one at the end that makes the difference in your season, basically.
It's so tough. So here we go again. We're rolling up for a season. We're only about really 80, 75 days away from training camp, and we'll be down there at McMaster University. We're keeping a look at this team. I think there was a lot of talk at the end of the season what would happen at quarterback. Well, they've committed to Bo Levi Mitchell. Do you believe that was the right move?
Yes. At the time when Bo was hurt during that season, I had my doubts as to whether or not he could bounce back being in the age he's in. But age is also a benefit to a player because he understands what it takes to get back into playing shape, etc. I think keeping Powell is something that has to happen for this club, and they may bring in other quarterback challengers at the same time. But I think Milanovic looked at Bo, saw his arm strength as back to what he thought it should be, saw his experience as a quarterback, and said, this is the guy we need to start with, and go to training camp with him as number one. And if somebody beats him out, okay. But other than that, Bo Levi Mitchell will be the quarterback.
The organization committed to bringing back several key parts, and this is your specialty, parts of that offensive line, and I think some of those names needed to be there. Yeah,
Woodmansey, Revenberg, Beard, those guys needed to be there. That's your core inside group that has to be there. It remains to be seen whether the tackles can live up to what they need to be good, because if your tackles are not absolutely good on the outside, your passing game is going to suffer. And remember, we're looking at a quarterback that's a drop-back quarterback.
Because Figueroa came in with a lot of hype, and he graded so well in his years with BC, and it's just been injury after injury for him, and you just hope that he can get back to what we expected him to be.
Joel Figueroa, when he first came into the Ticat organization, was let go because of injuries. And then he overcame those injuries in BC, came back to Hamilton, and ended up being injured again. So you're right. You count your offensive linemen, you talk about man hours. How many plays in every game can they stay? If you can keep your offensive line on the field without injury for long periods of time, they will get better as a unit. It's when something happens, and we're not talking about owies, because owies in the offensive line, the bone has to be coming through the skin before you take them out of the ballgame. And so the fact that you've got a lot of personnel there, you've got to mold them into a unit, then that unit has to stay on the field and has to put in the man hours.
There's a belief in football that the running back position has become extinct. That was not the case last year, I thought James Butler really emerged as someone that was really key to that offense.
I think you have to commit to a run game. When you say that the run game is no longer, viable, etc., every team that went to the Grey Cup in the number of years that I was here had a running game, and the running game was important to them. And Butler last year showed that he can do that. Now, Milanovic also signed a tight end this year from the school LSU, Thaddeus Moss. Moss is a tight end per se who can also go downfield as a receiver, but he's a blocker. In the past years, what they've had to do is use an offensive lineman as a tight end when you wanted to be in the run game. Well, that takes one of the pass receivers out of the ball game and so the defense can adjust to you. You bring in a guy like a Thaddeus Moss and play him as a tight end, they've got to respect him as a receiver. So they can't key in on that run game. And the run game, to me, is always where you have to start. And it brings up a great point. You know, in the early days of the CFL, practice was full pad, full go. And so the run game, you know, you actually saw the run game develop. Mm-hmm. Because people were knocking each other around. Now, without the pads on, a lot of times you get fooled if you're not very astute as a coach. You get fooled into thinking you got a run game when actually you don't.
Can I ask you that? Because, you know, you got a little old school in you. Like, this whole thing, because football to me is a contact sport, and I understand that there are safety measures that have to be taken. But I feel like there are some parts of football that just aren't as good as they used to be. And that's number one is on defense is tackling. And I'm wondering if the practices, without being in full uniform, if that's affected that specialty of the game.
I think you're right, Bubba. You know, tackling is such a great part of the game and has to be. You know, they've tried to come up with all kinds of devices to teach tackling. Well, tackling is the want to. You know, technique, yes, but the want to is really there. And when you practice now, what happens is as you come up for the tackle, you're told to bump off. You don't tackle. You don't take the man down. Mm-hmm. Now, that part of the ball game has suffered, I think, because of that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk defense here a little bit here, and I can't not ask you this question. There is a legend, we can call him. He's become, in his own mind and in this community and in the CFL, no Simone Lawrence. Did you see that coming?
No. Simone's still an athlete, a freak athlete, to be sure, who has the ability to continue to play. But at the same time, I'm proud of him for understanding that there's always a time to get out while you're still healthy and while you still have a future to go to. And the Ticat organization bringing him as an ambassador in Hamilton is a great move on their part. Simone Lawrence is really, he was one of the most outstanding players I've seen in all the years that I've been up here, because he could do so many things, and he did so many things. And, you know, we always laughed about the fact that he could talk to his opponents and get away with it. And some of the things he said probably, if it were Vegas, would stay in Vegas.
He's a special kind of guy, and you're right. It'll be interesting to see him in football and on a different side. Do you like what they did on defense? They've certainly got some guys from the Argonauts that can rush the passer, and arguably with Peters, maybe the best cornerback in the league.
I think rating the Toronto Argonauts for players is something I admire and really enjoy. But at the same time, when you look at it, if you're a player in Toronto and Toronto gives $1 million to their quarterback, how much money is there to spread around to these other players who definitely deserve it? And so they look at it and they say, well, you know, if I'm going to get a small raise, et cetera, and I'm staying here in a lesser facility, in a bigger community with all kinds of issues and travel, et cetera, and I look at Hamilton and I see that beautiful Tim Hortons Field and that great facility that's there, and I can make a few more bucks down there, and they want me, why wouldn't I go? And so I think Barlow and Kendricks and Peters, et cetera, made the right decision to come to Hamilton, and they'll certainly help Hamilton. If you can rush four guys, Bubba, and get to the quarterback and play cover on the back end, that's so much better than having to blitz all the time in order to get pressure.
Even though you had some wonderful guys playing on that D-line last year and even the year prior, that was an issue. I mean, guys would get there, and I know Coach O and many other coaches say sometimes it's not about the sack. Sometimes it's about just getting there. but they weren't getting there. And I thought sometimes that might have exposed that linebacking and secondary at times.
It did. It absolutely did. And I think that's why they made some of the adjustments they did in the defensive group for this year, including coaches. Obviously, the game is a drop-back game in CFL in the passing game, and so you have to have pass rushers. And so, it's kind of, okay, so you've got great pass rushers, but they've got to be able to disrupt that quarterback. They've got to be able to get there. You can't always have your will linebacker, Simone Lawrence, having to blitz in order to get to the quarterback. You've got to be able to do it with 4 people. And I think we had good people, but like you said, we weren't getting the job done completely. We were getting halfway there,
right? And
halfway doesn't make it.
2 last questions here. One simple. Will the streak end this year? Will the streak end this year? Will there be a Grey Cup in Hamilton in 2024?
If I could predict the Grey Cup, I wouldn't have to be here talking to you. I could be out making money someplace. No, I don't want to dismiss it. I want to just say that it's the goal. It's like I said before. Every draft choice, every practice, every game points to one thing, and that's the last game of the year.
You're getting real good at this media thing. How Beamsville?
Beamsville it is.
How many years have you been since you've come from the United States?
I came here in April 15th, 1985, and have never left. Even when I worked in Ottawa, even when I worked in Montreal, we made our home right here in the Hamilton area.
Well, you're a mainstay of this community, and we are so appreciative and lucky to have you here, as all the stuff that you did in the years as coaching, the stuff that you've done in the media as an analyst, what you continue to do with the Ticats Audio Network with your contributions, and from someone like myself that watched you from afar and has had the pleasure to work with you. It's been amazing. Thank you, and looking forward to many times and you coming right back on this couch to talk about a Grey Cup, maybe. We'll do that.
Well, Bubba, thank you so much, and it's easy to talk with you and all the guys that you mentioned earlier in the year on this broadcast. So thank you again for having me.
It's great to have you there, Coach. That's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports, especially if it's local. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline podcast do want to hear from you. Please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you do have something to say, please do. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.